FYI, find out about FOI, the Freedom of Information Act, and how you can make a difference in your community. Coming up next on Carolina People. Good morning. Welcome to Carolina People. This morning we're at the Fox 43 studio. We're focused on newspapers in the Carolinas, and we're visiting with Bill Rogers, the Executive Director of the South Carolina Press Association. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning, Greg. Glad to be here.
Thanks so much for coming in. I said the Carolinas because, of course, you started much of your career, or had part of your career there in the
Right. I grew up in North Carolina and worked for the Asheville Citizen-Times and went to the School of North Carolina in journalism. So
the school.
But I'm from South Carolina now.
The School of Journalism at Chapel Hill is one of the tops in the
yes, it is.
country.
One of the best.
Very well thought of. When a viewer hears the word journalism, I guess they almost always think of newspapers, but does it encompass more than that?
Yes, in today's society, it involves newspapers, of course, broadcast, and increasingly the Internet. Mm-hmm. So it's a changing field. Mm-hmm. But I think newspapers still are sort of the basic building block. They generate most of the news that is on the Internet. It comes from newspapers. So it sort of all works together. The fancy word for it is convergence, and I think we're seeing an increasing convergence of the media.
Mm-hmm. I think I saw in last week's Time magazine, the June 21st edition, there was a couple of pages about a lot of folks getting their news from a handful of folks that are reprocessing some good news pieces. They'll go to newspapers and then they'll churn out their own opinions on that. A heck of a lot of folks, much like the old, what was the guy? Oh, well, anyway, I mean, much like another.
Marshall McLuhan.
That's right. That's exactly right. It's fascinating to see the impact, as you say, the Internet can have on the marketplace and continues to have. Let's talk real quick about the South Carolina Press Association. How long have you been at the helm?
Greg, I've been there 17 years. So it's been a long time. Before that, I was a college professor, and then I worked before that in the newspaper business. So I've sort of stayed in journalism all along. But we represent all the newspapers of the state. Then we have 17 dailies in South Carolina and 72 weeklies.
72 weeklies?
Right.
Is that right?
So until last week, or a couple of weeks ago, every county in South Carolina had a local newspaper. Now we don't have one in Allendale.
I saw that they'd had to shut that down. A 1,500 subscriber publication there. That
they're still getting coverage, but they don't have their own community newspaper.
That was a tough hit. I can't remember, was it Community Newspaper Holdings or otherwise that had that publication? Or
Community Newspapers Incorporated. It's a different one than the NHI.
There's, of course, that aspect. When someone thinks of the difference between a daily and a weekly, what are the prime differences there, other than obviously that aspect of it just coming out once a week or twice a week? You could be a weekly and come out as many as, 3 times a week?
Right. Well, having worked on both daily and weekly newspapers, there's some similarities and there's some differences. Both strive to be part of the community. A larger daily, and South Carolina has got 3 major dailies, Charleston, Greenville, and Columbia, with over 95,000 circulation. Then below that we have the smaller ones, the mid-sized community dailies. But they both try, I think, to provide community news. However, a smaller community paper can give coverage to the local high school band, the wreck on Main Street, whereas the larger dailies, they also have a responsibility to cover the international and national, and the local communities don't do that. Right. So there are more space constraints, I would say, in the larger dailies. Even though they have more space, they got a lot more to put in them.
Right, they sure do, absolutely. The national and international news has to come out, and of course...
And luckily, South Carolina is still very much a newspaper state. About 7 out of 10 people read a newspaper on a regular basis. So that's right? Pretty good numbers.
That is. Of course, in our viewing area, there's 3 dailies: the Robertsonian, Community Newspaper Holdings property up in Lumberton, the Florence Morning News, the Media General property there, and of course Knight Ridder has the daily here. in the greater Myrtle Beach area.
And you probably get a little Wilmington in your area too, don't you?
The Star News, the New York Times paper up there, that's exactly right. It's amazing when you think about all four of those publications and their owners not being South Carolina based, albeit it may not have an impact really. I mean, they obviously continue to make a huge impact in the state itself, but it's amazing how Post and Courier has gotten into owning a lot of the folks down there owning a lot of TV stations, none of them in South Carolina.
Well, the Post and Courier also owns a lot of community newspapers.
Is that right?
They own Georgetown, Kingstree, Somerville. They own quite a few of the community newspapers around their area. And this clustering is a trend you see.
Media General has, of course, not only the Florence Morning News, but the Marion Mullins paper, the Lake City paper, Hemingway. You're right, it is amazing.
And there goes back to that convergence, because they can take the reporters for one can feed stories to the other, and it makes them all a better product.
Sure. Of course, one of the great thrills about getting you in today was that opportunity to talk about the Freedom of Information Act and the impact that has on viewers or readers' lives or just regular citizens who happen to be viewers and readers, their lives. When a viewer hears about the Freedom of Information, I know we got a lot of time this morning, but I sure want to highlight that and then come back to a little more about yourself. But the Freedom of Information Act is just what?
Well, it guarantees open meetings and open records for the citizens of South Carolina. It is not just for the media. It's for everyone. And basically, the idea is the public has a right to see how their government works. I mean, we're the guys paying the taxes, so they work for us, and we need, like we were owners of a company who would get to see the records and know what's going on in the company. The taxpayers are the stakeholders in government, and so they should have a right to know what's going on. And the Freedom of Information Act guarantees that right. They get to see records, they get to attend meetings, and they get to know about the meetings ahead of time. They can't say, oops, forgot to tell you about that meeting last Thursday. They have to now announce it 24 hours in advance. Mm-hmm. So it protects the public, gives them access to their government.
Would the public have to tell their government why they want to see things?
No. And there is no use requirement. They can't make you tell why you want information. There are some limitations about commercial solicitation. We have problems with people using the FOIA to get burglary reports from the police departments and then pestering the people who have just had a break-in. Do you want to buy a burglar alarm? Well, that leaves a bad taste. So you can't use it for commercial solicitation in most cases. But Joe Citizen comes in and says, I'd like a copy of this document or the minutes of this meeting. They can't say, why do you want it, and put them through the third degree. They have to give it to them.
Mm-hmm. There was an AP piece about 5 years ago about South Carolina officials often fail to comply with Freedom of Information laws.
Right. And it was an interesting thing, Greg. We had a great debate as to how we should approach this. We called it an FOI audit. And basically, we went around to every county in the state, every school board in the state, in major cities, and asked for routine documents that should be available under the law. But the debate was whether we should go in and say we're journalists or go in and say we're citizens. Mm-hmm. And we decided, well, we're going to go in and just say we want the record, and if we're asked, we will say we're journalists, but we're not going to volunteer that information. Mm-hmm. Because we found out that was the right approach, because when the public officials found out journalists were doing it as they did in one area in the upstate, the minute the journalists there, the document was ready, and it was, the journalists actually got more response than the average citizens did in this audit. The bottom line is that about 30% of the time, the public couldn't get the document they wanted. So I think it was 72% of the time the FOI request was granted and they got the document. And we didn't ask for anything controversial. We asked for very basic things, that there was no doubt that this was open. So it was interesting. We may try to do a follow-up this year. The Press Association and the Associated Press may do that.
Of course, part of the reason you think they would provide it for journalists post-haste was thoughts of lawsuits, or what would have prompted them to do it for journalists and not for average Joe or Jane?
That's a good question. I think the fear of bad publicity was part of it. I don't know. I think the Joe public also doesn't know what rights they have. They don't know who to ask. they're sometimes intimidated, and they can be easily put off. Where a reporter is less likely to be put off and will say, no, you have to give me that. The law says right here, you've got to give me that document. Whereas a citizen will go in, he's told he can't have it, then he'll just turn around and leave.
I think that piece opened up with, want to know if someone's in jail. In some places, you'll be told it's not your business.
Right.
And of course, that is, there's a lot of aspects, a lot of reasons why someone may want to know who's in jail.
That's one of the basic, and we saw, I think in America, we take open government for granted. I just got back from Cuba, and they have no rights about anything. They can't even read a paper or watch television, only government channels. So we in America are very spoiled, but I think we should not take our democracy for granted. And a key thing in democracy is the fourth estate, the media, who is the watchdog, and who goes and asks if to see the expense reports for the director of the waste authority, or ask for the school board's travel expenses, or ask for, the media does serve a watchdog. It's an important role if we are to keep our democracy, and that's, I think, very important.
The South Carolina Press Association annually or biannually provides awards or recognizes papers that have properly used FOIA.
Right. And we and this year, and I think it went to a small paper in Blythewood, South Carolina, who was started by a housewife who decided, I'm tired of government not being operated in the back room. So she started a newspaper called the Country Chronicle and started asking questions. And it turned out at the last, and she really found out about members of the Planning Commission not even being from the community. They were brought in, and then she also found out about industrialization plans for this small community that the community wasn't aware of. Some people were, but most people weren't. They didn't want it. So thanks to her reporting, the council was totally ousted, and a new regime is in, and I think the people are back in control of the government in Blythewood because of the media.
Wow. That's powerful.
It is. It's a powerful example of what happens if you don't have a media covering government. It's watchdog. And there should be not antagonism, but a healthy respect, but a challenge. That's one of the roles of the press, is to challenge authority. My wife says I challenge authority all the time.
One of the roles of the press is to challenge authority. That's very interesting. I don't think I've ever heard that. Break that down a little bit. Help a viewer understand why that's important.
Well, I think it's important because the average citizen doesn't have the time or the background to do it. They can't go to the city council meetings. They've got a job, and the media can, and the media has to challenge things. And it goes from the smallest school board up to the federal level. It has to be challenged. And sometimes people blame the media for challenging. Say, a few years ago, it's probably been 15 years ago, there was a president of the University of South Carolina, Jim Holderman, and the media started looking into some of his expenses. And in the end, he wound up resigning, and he's now in jail for some pretty gross missteps. But the media was blamed for that. And they say, you hounded a good man out of office. And no, the media didn't do it. The media was a watchdog who reported on it, and then the public demanded he be removed from office. The media doesn't do it. The media just throws it out on the table. In our society, I think the truth will out. I guess is that Shakespeare that said that? The truth will out, and that's what the media does. Throws it out there. Then you decide what you want to do, whether you're going to vote for George Bush or you're going to vote for John Kerry or David Beasley or whoever. The media's job is to throw the information out, and then you make your choice.
The Sun News and one of their journalists did some superb reporting and helping to, as you say, the public got involved in helping to bring to the forefront some potential serious discrepancies
I
in
think there was some trips
the Waccamaw Regional Transit Authority.
Paid for.
There's a heck of a lot of things that happen with the group, and that has had a big impact on helping them to rearrange things and helping make sure they're running things properly and getting the board more involved in overseeing the day-to-day responsibilities.
Well, what's the old cliche about power corrupts, and Absolute power corrupts, absolutely. And if there's nobody watching over these people, then human nature being what it is, things could happen. So it's a healthy thing to have the media watching over things. And so I hope people will not get mad when the media publishes a story critical of a public official or whoever and say, okay, they did their job, now it's my job to decide whether I'm upset about it or not. Sometimes I think the media goes overboard. They will talk about somebody spending $120 a night at a motel at a meeting. Well, I'm sorry, but that's what it costs these days. And so sometimes the media, but that's okay. The important thing is that they report it. Then the public decides, well, it doesn't bother me that they spent $120 for a hotel. Or it does. That's my decision. The media's job is to get that information out.
You all have some amazing links, some great links. Someone put some time into doing that at your website, scpress.org, scpress.org. It also has links for our viewers in North Carolina who could check out the North Carolina Press Association. Do you have a symbiotic relationship with other regional press associations?
Yes, we work very closely with the North Carolina Press Association. We had a joint meeting in Pinehurst a couple of years ago, and we're inviting them to our meeting. So, yes, and we trade information. We link our websites, and we have a good relationship.
You had some other great links there about just resources and the understanding for any viewer or any reader to get involved with the freedom of information and to be able to see what the Act states, what a Joe or Jane citizen can take advantage of so that they can know what's really happening in their lives.
And we welcome your viewers to check it out. If they have a question about their rights under the Freedom of Information Act, go to our site and click on the FOI thing on the right, and that's a technical term thing. Click on that at the right, and they'll get it. They'll also get a plain language translation. That's the important part. Along with the law, they'll get a plain language translation. And I hope public officials in your viewing area will go to it, too, if they have a question.
That's right.
Why do public officials violate the FOI? Sometimes it's out of ignorance. Sometimes it's to cover things up. Sometimes it's just the way they've always done it, and they'll just keep on doing it unless somebody challenges them. But it's important that public officials' feet be held to the fire by the public. And the public are the ones that have to demand that openness in government. And if a government continues to hide things from the public, I think the public has to say, consider that when they cast their ballot the next time. Do I want somebody who doesn't even trust me with the information about my government? So I think they should demand, the public needs to demand openness in government.
Bill, you all have a toll-free number, 888-SC-PRESS, that a viewer could call if they were interested in learning more. Sure, we'll be glad to send them a two-page version of the FOI. If they don't have internet access, call us and we'll be glad to send them that. Representing that almost 100 member papers around the state of South Carolina and possibly even more folks, what are some of y'all's primary duties in helping to represent your members? Well, I think probably the thing that I've come to realize, I was a working journalist before I came to the Press Association, but I never really realized that we're about the only people speaking out for open government. Us and the League of Women Voters are about it, and there are a lot of people speaking to close government, including government itself. We've had hearings in the State House about Freedom of Information Law reform, and the room will be packed, and there'll only be two people in there speaking for opening it up, and the rest of them will be the lobbyists and the people from the agency saying, oh, if you do this, government as we know it will change. And we say, yeah, that's the idea. Golly, Bill, I didn't know there were that many folks concerned because, of course, when it becomes part of the public record, even if it's not open, I mean, it's immutable. It's very difficult to change. What they be protecting or trying to not necessarily cover up but not let out as fast, why would anyone care? Well, a part of it is the news value. If you sit on something long enough, it ceases to become newsworthy. So if we had a case in Charleston some years ago where a coach was arrested for drunken driving. The media could not get the arrest warrant. Over a week went by. Well, I'm sorry. If it was Joe Citizen, they'd get the arrest warrant right away. So another protection that important people aren't given different treatment than the average person. And a great example of that happened in Union, South Carolina, last year when a candidate for the school board superintendent job was arrested for shoplifting.
And the sheriff up there, who happened to be a family friend, claimed that she was going to enter pretrial intervention, and so they weren't going to release the fact that the incident report, the fact that she'd been arrested. We're going to cover it all up because she knew the sheriff. Well, the Press Association and the newspaper, it was a small daily, the newspaper went to bat, filed suit, and got that overturned and made it clear that you can't just put someone in pretrial intervention the minute they're arrested and hide their arrest. Otherwise, O.J. might be there today.
Right. How did the press, I mean, oftentimes you're fascinated how the press finds out about things. It's as if they get tips, and tips can remain anonymous, or how does that work, Bill, that a reporter like yourself, either at one point or currently, how do you, someone can talk to you on the record or off the record, is that correct?
That's true.
How does that work?
Well, I think a lot of people don't understand how it works, and there is no universal rule. My rule as a reporter was if someone, you can't say something to me as a reporter and at the end then say, oh, by the way, that's off the record. You have to tell me up front. If you tell me up front, that's off the record, and I agree to it, then okay, that's off the record. But you can't, and all the time people will tell you this stuff and say, oh, by the way, that's off the record. Sorry, it's not off the record until I agree to it up front. And then you have to be careful, because if someone tells a reporter something off the record, and then the reporter finds out about it from somebody else, puts the reporter in an awkward position of appearing to violating the trust of the person. But it's not, we have a shield law in South Carolina, thanks to the efforts of the Press Association mainly, where a reporter can't be forced to reveal his sources unless it can't be obtained anywhere else, and it's got to be vital to the case. So we have a very good shield law in South Carolina. And the reason is, people will sometimes tell reporters something that they won't tell the police. Good example, great example, a little town in Lancaster, South Carolina. They had a sheriff's election just a few weeks ago, primary. The week before the primary, a letter was circulated on county letterhead accusing one of the candidates of molestation, of sexual attacks and other harassment against 6 women. Well, the newspaper was in a quandary. Do I publish this? So they said, well, we're going to check every one of these 6 women out and see if this is true. But obviously, it was circulating in the community. It was out in the public. They went to every one of these 6 women, and all 6 women said, yes, this happened. One of them was a 16-year-old girl who was a police cadet and was forced into unnatural acts with this policeman. This candidate was a policeman at the time. Right. So then the newspaper did due diligence to find out if it was true, found out that yes, it was true, and ran a story about it. They were criticized from some quarters. How could you print this about this man? Well, that's the newspaper's job. The guy lost in the election. But the important question there is, how could this be covered up for so long? And if the newspaper hadn't printed that, it'd be covered up to this day. So that's why it's important for the newspaper to challenge authority.
Bill, we got about 2 minutes. Sunshine Sunday coming up in September. Real quick, for viewers who may not visit scpress.org or may not call your 888 SC Press number, what do they want to know about Sunshine Sunday?
Well, it's kind of good. The legislature has declared a week in September as Open Government Week, and it's the first time it's ever happened in South Carolina. And we're going to have editorials, ads, a lot of things, trying to inform the public as to why it's important to have open government and why it's important to have the FOI. It's patterned after a similar week in Florida, but the first time we've had it in South Carolina. It's called Sunshine Sunday, and it's coming up in September.
Okay, that's exciting. There's so much that goes on within the South Carolina Press Association. You're out on the road a good bit, visiting the weeklies and the dailies. Yeah. I think you said, 78 weeklies?
72 weeklies.
72 weeklies statewide,
right,
and 17 dailies.
Right.
Golly, 90 publications out there. As small as the one you said started up there in Blythewood,
right,
or the Myrtle Beach Herald, a very small paper, as large as the Post and Courier or the State or the Greenville News there. That's incredible. For you, the excitement must be on a daily basis.
It's a challenge. It's a challenging job, and one that I enjoy doing. So that makes it worthwhile.
When you think about that impact for you growing up in Asheville and starting there at the Citizen Times up there, do you look back and think, that time at Chapel Hill in journalism school, that this has been, you made the right career move?
Yeah, journalists don't go into it for the money, which sometimes is frustrating, but it's a rewarding, it's something that changes every day, it makes an impact. So I think we're very lucky to be in journalism. It's changed a lot and will continue to change.
That's great. That's great. Bill, thanks so much for being with us this morning.
You're welcome.
Stay tuned to more Carolina People with Bill Rogers coming up next. Want to see how your taxes are being spent? Some officials may say, you can't see those records. If you've been with us the last 30 minutes, you'll see how you can rectify that. Call the South Carolina Press Association at 1-888-SC-PRESS or visit them online at scpress.org. Bill Rogers, thanks for being with us this morning.